This is my latest artwork, and in this video I'm gonna share my painting process and some tips so you can create an illustration like this. Hey everyone! Welcome to another Mind Sketch Studio video. My name is 𝗤𝗓𝗓 𝗔𝗓, I am an illustrator, and in this video I'm gonna share my painting process of my latest illustration with Captain America, Red Skull, and the Winter Soldier. I started my illustration process as usual, creating a couple of thumbnail sketches. I did 3 of them, and I ended up choosing the one with the composition I like the most. Then it was time to prepare my paper and start sketching my drawing for the final illustration. And the reason why I've been deciding to do my sketch on the final paper is that I can shade some cast shadows, and when I come with my rubber erase, I erase all of my lines, but the cast shadows will not be completely disappeared, so they can guide me through the painting later on. Then I chose a vanishing point and started to create some perspective lines to do some wreckage, boxes, and buildings. Next step was erasing my sketch and defining my line work so I could start painting. And I chose my favorite medium, which is gouache. Now it was time to create my mask with my tracing paper and my magic tape. I already mentioned this technique in other videos, and it's a really interesting, useful, and handful technique to create your mask for your illustration. This technique tends to be cheaper than the masking fluid, but it has the same effectiveness. I prefer this technique even for washes because I think the magic tape holds very well and the ink doesn't bleed inside the mask. And it happens sometimes with the masking fluid depending on how thick the fluid is on paper. After finishing my mask and applying over the top of my illustration in the area to be masked, it was time to pick up my first color to be mixed with a little bit of water and create my background. I use a very small pot to mix my color and water, and my mixture ratio is approximately 40% of water and 60% of paint. Sometimes a little bit more paint than water. My idea was also painting Red Skull's face with an airbrush, so in order to do that I had to create a second mask to preserve the areas around his face. I made another mask to also paint some smoke arising from the background. It was my very first time creating this type of smoke. It was just an idea that I had. I didn't regret, but I think I would work better the concept for a next project. Time to start painting my characters. I started mixing yellow and red so I could achieve the skin tone that I wanted for Captain America and the Winter Soldier. I like to create skin tones using yellow and red, and then I add a little bit of black to create shades and also create darker skins according to the character. Then I moved forward to start painting the superhero costumes. I like to start adding a very diluted first layer of gouache, and then I start adding darker colors to create the contrast. These darker areas are also diluted layers, and after adding the darker colors, I come with a little bit of clean water so I can mix with the underneath color, creating shades and smooth transitions. My main goal with this technique is not creating a thick paint, but instead of this, it's just creating a couple of thin layers with gouache so I can keep my own style. I like to use a small flat chisel brush so I can control a little amount of water in it to avoid smudging the underneath layer and make a mess with my painting. Time to move forward and start painting the Winter Soldier. I had in mind to create a very dark costume, so the lightest color would be a light gray coming from the reflection of his vibranium arm. I added the darkest shades of gray and with a little bit of clean water started to create the gradient transitions. My painting technique, it's almost not touching the paper with the bristles, and the slight touches give me extreme control with the watery gouache paint on creating the gradient areas on my painting. I also use to outline areas with the same color I'm gonna paint. It helps me to create a contour of the area where the color are going to be, and also to avoid a black line work, which is the art style that I don't want to get to. One thing that I didn't know is that after using the airbrush, you cannot come with a brush and create brush strokes over it, since they smudge everything the airbrush painted underneath. So I hope you guys don't make this mistake as I did. After painting the red skull, it was time to add some cracks on the wreckage. After making the mistake to remove almost everything that I painted with the airbrush, I suddenly decided to repaint Red Skull, but this time using the brush. I think this was the most important thing I've learned from this illustration, which is painting everything with the airbrush at the very end. I started to prepare to wrap up the illustration with final touches before adding the highlights. I used color pencils to emphasize some areas on Red Skull's face and also a white pencil to create some highlights. I didn't use white gouache in these areas because I was a little bit afraid after messing up with the airbrush work. Moreover, the colored pencils can create really nice textures over the paint. It's finally time for my favorite part of the paint, which is adding white highlights. To my mind, this is one of the most important parts of the paint, because highlights are responsible to bring some life to the illustration and also create contrast to bring balance between mid-tones and darker areas. I create some bright areas mixing a watery layer of white paint with the underneath layer and crispy highlights with white gouache coming out of the tube with a very little amount of water on the bristles. Using a watery layer of white gouache is really useful because you don't need necessarily to mix your painting on the palette. You can add the white gouache with a little bit of water, reactivating the underneath layer to create colored highlights. And this is my final illustration, Captain America, Red Skull, and the Winter Soldier. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and the illustration process, and I hope you guys can also learn something from the tips I shared here. If you like the video, give a thumbs up, and let me know in the comments if you guys already tried one of these techniques and which superhero or fantasy character you guys would like to see me creating and painting in my channel. I will most likely slow down my work schedule because of the end of the year, so if you guys don't see me sharing any other videos, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And last but not least, thanks for watching and see you in the next video.